Perfect, perfect. Okay, so just a quick room check. Who was here last week? Who was at the session last week? Okay, good. So this is episode 2 of 3 for the class of 2024. And I just wanted to quickly recap basically what was covered in last week's session. Since we had a little bit of a technology debacle, I went back and re-recorded the session and posted that to our YouTube page. But we talked about the process around applying for your program. We talked about the eligibility requirements for studying abroad. And we had a super, super quick note about housing and basically shouted out that we would be talking more about housing and funding options in episode 3, which is next week. So that's a very, very quick recap on what happened last week. The eligibility piece, I really won't dive too much into again right now in this recap, because we're going to be talking about petitions, and that will by proxy sort of explain the eligibility requirements. And as far as the application, the main thing to remember from last week's session, if you weren't able to watch the recording or see it in person, as disorganized as we might have been, is that it's a 2-step process. You apply to Smith so that you can leave campus and have the approval of everyone you need, including advisors and our team. And then you apply to your program for acceptance and things like your visa and all of those documents, getting those in order. It's not sequential per se. That's the main thing to remember. You might be working on your program application first and then submitting your Smith applications for the February deadline in the spring semester afterwards, or in reverse. Remember, the plan for today is we're going to do an around the world with programs, which is why you all have the approved programs list in front of you, and why we're seated by sort of who we think we might want to be taking classes with when we're overseas. And we're also going to be, as I mentioned already, covering petitions. Next week, the deep dive into health, wellness, safety, and then budgeting, where we're going to cover the homeschool fees process and what that means as a Smith student. So I love live concerts, and I've been in some places of the world that when my favorite artists announce they're going on a world tour, it's really not true. They just are only going to the world that you see on the screen here. But for real, this is around the world. You know that Smith has programs in all 6 continents that you actually want to go to, unless you're an ES&P major and you have a glutton for punishment and want to go to Antarctica to study that climate. But before I actually get into the definitions of these, I want you in your groups to talk through why it's important to you. Identify some of the programs on the list. If you haven't already done that as part of your worksheet exercise last week, identify some of the programs on the list in front of you. If you don't have them, please share. And talk about why that's important to you. Why do you want to take classes in that setting? What about that institution is speaking to you and why that's important? And there we go, thank you. And if you're talking about like mixing it up and trying to get involved, there's a lot of people at these green tables in the front getting involved with both locals when you're taking classes and study abroad students. Then what challenges do you think you might face when you're in those different class environments where it's focused on you as study abroad students in one setting and then the locals in another setting? And if you need a copy too, I have the old, the good old study abroad worksheet here. Is there anyone who, yeah, wasn't here last week, I can hand these out. Everybody has to be 100% prepared. Yeah, of course. You need one. Do you want a worksheet? Yes. Honed in and focused, right? It's specific. Where you'd want to dive in and identify the descriptions that they've offered. Where you're in the field and with set of outside the classroom. So it could be a good fit for your major. I don't have like that. What is your major? Yeah, probably. They're more like in the science and although they're also trash. I would say you're probably leaning more towards the choice where you're directly involved. And that means we can Smith and spoken in Morocco. The coursework there is English primarily. There are Arabic intensive language courses on offer through the SIT program, but because the majority of the courses there is taught in English, you actually need only 1 year of either French or Arabic. Yeah, or like an accelerator. If there's no E and there's no flag, but it's in a country where the local language is taught at Smith, then the requirement is Australia. And so it's interesting, right? Because you're considering two very different program types. Yeah. I mean, the one that Lila's on, that's very, the intent is to incorporate elements of the Danish culture.
Am I going to understand?
To be honest with you, I don't know that I have like a full grasp on the approval process, but my understanding is that it will be qualified as like a non-application process for that. Which school program are you thinking of? That's a big question, right? Some of the yeah. So you can apply if they ask yeah, I can give you and then right now there's so okay, 2 minutes. I'm curious Okay. It's a good question for the Spanish. The language requirement about it here. So hold that thought. Looking at parents as an option. And I'm just curious what. We've had the chance to do some really good discussion about your goals and everything. What I wanted to do now was move into sort of defining what this means, right? What does it mean if I only take, if I'm taking classes with locals, if I'm taking classes in a mixed setting, or if I'm taking classes that are designed by design for study abroad students. So, sorry, I lost a little bit of track with what my color coding was. Orange, who's sitting at an orange table and was thinking about taking classes strictly with other study abroad students? And what does that mean? Who's thinking about a program, for example, like where the courses are designed for study abroad students? Not sure. Some question about that? So, I've got my slides a little mixed here. Sorry for that. The definition really around that model is called the study abroad center, right? This doesn't mean that it's insular per se and that you're separated from the local culture, but instead it just means that the coursework and the support available is localized around the cohort that's there, and the courses that you're taking are in a center where access is for you. That's okay. So if you're thinking about DIS in Copenhagen, and I heard that there were some who were in the room at like pre-health session and heard from Delilah Mora over in Denmark this semester. That's the type of program and the type of setting that you're in on DIS abroad. And usually these are smaller settings as well. So
just add to that. Hi everyone, Lisa Johnson from the Study Abroad office. So DIS is just one example of a study abroad center. There's study abroad centers in all regions of the world, right? So you can find a study abroad center in all regions. So DIS is one example of where as Angelo had said, you're taking your classes. The classes are designed specifically for study abroad students from U.S. colleges and universities, and there's generally a robust selection of courses to choose from. Just keep that in mind. DIS is not the only study abroad.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that. And the folks seated at the purple tables, if I'm correct in my color coding, you had identified that you wanted to take classes with locals. Oh. Purple was you had a green table. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. So what does that mean for you? Why is taking classes with locals important? What do you think that the environment might be like? Or just shout out the program that you're thinking of, maybe. Yeah.
I think for me, studying language, French, and to be studying with a bunch of locals that would be like a full immersion.
Yeah.
So that's what I just.
I'm just going to repeat your answer because this is recording, and I think the mics might not have picked it up, but yeah, being immersed and feeling like you wanted to really dive in on language learning. So you're thinking about going to France. It's great. Well, I'm going to go back to slides. It's, again, not the only place where direct enroll is an option, but a good example of that model where you're plugged in really as part of the institution, maybe categorized as something like a visiting student or on exchange, is the University of Auckland. And in a lot of the rest of the US, the English-speaking world. You're living in student residences, the same as a New Zealander might be, or someone from that area, whichever the country is. And you are not, there are no sections of the course catalog that are cordoned off from you as a study abroad student. It's really the world being your oyster in that sense, but you want to be making sure that you're also paying attention to the course prerequisites and all the things that you would do the same as if you were choosing a course here. And a key note about direct enroll too is that I sort of think of it like if you were to spend a semester away, for example, at the University of Ohio or something like that. I don't know if any of our partner institutions have 60,000 students, but the student populations usually are much higher. So in a classroom where you're directly enrolling, you're in a larger setting. So just important to note about what that means for your experience. And that may not be true across the board. It depends on the setting. Am I missing anything?
It's pretty true, yeah. The direct enroll schools are generally have enrollment in the tens of thousands. So think UMass Amherst in terms of large university settings. So you become one of those students and stuff, which is for some could be a really exciting opportunity to just become one of many and take some really exciting classes. For others, that might feel a little daunting. So again, that's why we're wanting to use this worksheet, to help you define what's the best type of program for you.
Right. And what about those of you thinking about a mix? Let's hear some program ideas from folks seated at the tables, 3 tables here in the front, and how you think that having a mix of those 2 environments would be impactful to your experience.
We're tired today, aren't we? Oh no. What are some of the benefits of taking some of your classes at a program in the program center and some of your classes at the local university?
I think you wanted to chime in. Go ahead. Yeah.
It adds like the kind of familiarity of having like a study abroad center where you're going to be with other students who are studying abroad, or like there's some like study programs you can think about where you would be with other students, but also getting to experience what it's like to be a student in a different setting. That's kind of that's world sort of situation.
Right, so getting a mix of classes could be the best of both worlds. It could be that you find your people in the small cohort of study abroad students at the center, and that you explore being another version of you with all of the other ways that you get to plug into the host community. So again, not the only example of this, but that's a model type that we call integrated study abroad centers, and the Japan associated Kyoto program as an example. You can see that being one of our consortium programs on the approved programs list. And sometimes this model will be that there is an intensive like AKP There's an intensive language program that's built in at the front end of the experience or throughout. And that's the centerpiece and the rest is integrated. And sometimes it will be that there are a mix of courses. So in Paris, for example, going back to your example, a mix of courses, both language and otherwise, that you might be taking at the center. And then half of your schedule might be plugged in and integrated with the host institution. And then I think in this green mix of things as well too, we have some folks considering field study as well, right? Or research. That I saw somebody pulled up that School for Field Studies webpage, maybe in the front. Oh, there we go. So the why is it important? Like, can anybody talk about the importance, why you want to build in research or doing independent things on your program? Were you also thinking SFS? SIT. Okay, so
I guess I was so used to like doing Smith and like going to the going through all these classes and taking them the same way that we take them here. But if you get to do something like field studies or SIT, you get to kind of go out to the work, do some field research, do an independent project, do an internship, which gives you kind of, for me, it would sound like a break from like the academic cycle. It'll be a little bit different than what I think it's to break up my time here with something that is really engaging, but not exactly what I do here.
It's a really good point. Yeah, engaging, but not exactly the same. A field study type of model that you're seeing here on the screen. This is an SIT program, but you'll notice them on the approved programs list as well because they have really themed or thematic titles. Something that clearly stands out as being focused on a particular academic area, and yeah, the SIT model is an interesting one too, but something that both Lisa and I are familiar with, where they are, you're operating under a lead researcher, and they're helping you to generate knowledge that serves the community too. School for Field Studies operates in a way that they're setting a 5-year longitudinal, almost like set of research topics that could serve the community. And so these can be really impactful and yeah, super engaging for sure. As much learning is going to be happening on this type of program outside in the world or in the city or wherever you're based as it is in a classroom setting. But again, very small and focused on who's there on the program with you. So. Okay. I mentioned not wanting to recap too in depth about eligibility from last week because we're going to talk about petitions today. And so I'm going to pass it over to Lisa.
Do you talk about language or is that coming?
It's coming. Do you want to?
But you just stand close to me so that we can get on the recording. Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Johnson. And I just wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about the petitions and the opportunity to petition should it pertain to you. It may not, but it is a question in the City of Broad approval application. Are you petitioning, yes or no? And sometimes students like, I don't know. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. Big picture, when you're petitioning, you're asking for an exception, right? And depending on what you're petitioning for, the exception may be to be approved to City of Broad despite the fact your GPA isn't meeting that 3.0 threshold. Or you might be asking for exception to City of Broad in 2 different locations, 1 location for fall semester and 1 location for the spring semester. Or you may be petitioning to City of Broad on a program that isn't on the list of 120 plus programs that's on the list of approved programs.
And then your last option for petitioning is a petition to be allowed to study abroad for the full academic year in the UK, Ireland, Australia, and New Zealand. So when you're asking for an exception, you need to have a strong academic rationale as to why the exception should be made. Right? And so when you're thinking about if you want or need to petition, you need to be thinking about what are your reasons why you think this exception should be made, right? And every student's different. Every student has different reasons as to why they want an exception, but you have to be able to articulate that. If you think you will be petitioning for any one of these scenarios, you need to meet with me before you submit your study abroad approval applications in February. And I highly recommend that you try to do that you meet with me this fall semester so that I can walk you through the process and really let you, help you understand what are the parts and pieces that go into a petition, okay? So if you think you're going to be petitioning, send me an email and let me know that you want to petition for X, Y, or Z. And then send me some times when you have breaks in your schedule. A petition meeting takes about 45 minutes, right? So it's longer than the appointment slots that Angela and I have, the 20-minute appointment slots. So that's why we need to schedule it outside of those times. Okay? And then I'll walk you through the process so that you're well prepared to submit the petition materials in February, okay? If none of this applies to you, then when you get to the approval application in Sites, which is our online application portal, they ask you the question, are you petitioning? You can just say no and move on to the next sections. Okay, is that clear? Any questions about that? Right now? Yeah, sure. What's up? Can you find your email? It's on the Study Abroad site, so look for about us, or I'm sure I'm the only Lisa Johnson, and my email is LD as in David, LD Johnson @smith.edu. All right. So far, so good on petitions. Cool. Good luck. I'm turning it back over.
Awesome. And there were, I think in the survey responses from the class, there were definitely some questions about that. So hopefully that covers most of the ground. And please disregard the timeline that I had on the slide. I was, I think, just going off of some older information, not 1 month before the deadline, but this semester.
Well, so sort of. So 1 month before the deadline, for those of you who are not applying to any of the SWIFT programs, that would be January 21st. Are you back before January 21st for spring semester? The 24th, right? So counting backwards, that 1 month deadline is true, but I think you should use your whole semester for that rather than last minute January 21st. And that day will likely be full of petition appointments. So use your time wisely, get me early so that you can use your winter break to work on petition and application.
Yeah, so here again are the list of petitions. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so it's just anything that's not on this list, right? Like if you want, so as long as like if I want to choose something that's on this list, I don't have to have anything.
You want to choose something that's on the list? Yep, study there for just 1 semester.
Or a year, if it's open for a year.
Or a year, yep, if it's not an English-speaking location. Or isn't listed as being an academic year option, because I think SOAS is an academic year option in an English-speaking country, then yes, you do not need to submit a petition. Another question? 2 questions.
I'm just curious, like what would be an example of like a reason for petitioning to stay in a certain place for more than 1 semester? Like what if it's just
Into the UK? Yeah, that's a good question. And it's actually kind of up for grabs. But for me, English majors going to England, that's a pretty good reason. Or medieval studies majors also going to England, that's a pretty good reason. And stuff. There have been other majors who have successfully petitioned to do a year in the UK. in Australia and New Zealand. They take a look at the curriculum in the university and they identify specific courses that are year-long courses only. So then you write your petition in such a convincing way that, you know, I need to take this course. This is a perfect fit for my academic plan. You also will be giving support from a faculty member who's going to say, echo your words and stuff like that. So I would think of it, you know, academic rationale. What do you have to gain by spending a year there versus just?
Was that your question too, or?
No, I just had more of a general question. I think we might have covered it the first time, but I was kind of curious if you were talking about the date. So if we apply by that, like, I'm kind of confused with the timeline. So if you apply like within the next few months, is that for like your junior fall, or how does the timeline go and like all of that? That's just my question.
Angela, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, that's you have that. That's essentially right. So if you want to travel overseas and study abroad on term time programs in fall 2022, spring 2023, or for the academic year, so that's your junior year if you're in your first semester, sophomore year now, the deadline will be in the coming months. So February is when you're going to want to have your Smith study abroad acceptance application submitted on site.
And that's for the spring too? Like,
that's right.
Okay, and then if you want to do maybe like senior year fall, that would be next year.
Not February 2022, but February 2023. That's right.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, anything else on petitions? All right, let's talk about language requirements. So this was another like pretty recurrent theme in the responses from the class on the survey, and we just wanted to kind of touch on this week because we're going into depth about all of the program options. And so when the course is taught, when the local language is taught at Smith, then as a general rule, some language proficiency is going to be required to be demonstrated. What that means is, if you're on a program where the courses are taught in the host country language, I have those listed here, then you're going to want to present and demonstrate proficiency for the equivalent of 2 years or more of college study. And so for French, German, Italian, Spanish, and Russian, that means 2 semesters at the 200 level. Or if you feel like you can place out, I think I had a question about this from there in the corner about French. If you feel that you could place out, you're gonna wanna direct your questions to the particular department, but you can demonstrate some proficiency at an advanced 200 or 300 level and enroll in the course the semester before you go. Am I missing anything there? Yeah, and then there are at our centers in Paris, Hamburg, and Geneva, some unique requirements. Anybody considering the Geneva program, if you didn't have the chance to attend the info sessions there or watch the recordings of those, there are tracks within that program, for example, where you only need 1 semester of French, or there may be 0 language requirement as well, depending on the track. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear. Where you can find it? I do, yeah. It's on the Lewis Global Study Center YouTube channel. Yeah, and we have a whole playlist of videos with a bunch of other recordings from different sessions that we've run, including last week's for your class, and a study abroad playlist. Yeah. Yeah.
I just had I just thought of it, like, how is the study abroad going to go with COVID now? Like, I wasn't sure what happened.
So the question is, how are things going to go with COVID, and what's happening now? What do we anticipate happening? I'll touch on it briefly today. We are going to do a really thorough review in next week's session on health and safety. That's okay. You know, the way things are looking right now, we have students studying abroad in countries that are identified as a level 4 by the CDC, and students have been overseas since spring 2021 in last academic year. We have a pretty good sized cohort of students traveling overseas in the spring 2022 semester as well, under varying levels of, you know, CDC warnings and travel advisories and so on. So we're just kind of in a world now where COVID is endemic, and we're learning to live with what that means. Unless things, and of course we have a group here on campus that's reviewing key metrics, and policies are being set according to those. But unless things take a surprising sour turn globally, then we're allowing travel to go forward at the college. And then as far as language requirements go, coming back to this, there are another set of programs on the approved list where you're going to be studying in a host location. The courses are taught, though, in English, but again, that country's local language is taught here at Smith. And in those instances, like the languages that you see on the screen here, you would be required to show the equivalency of 1 year of college study in that language. And that could mean that it's 1 semester course at an advanced 100 level, or 2 semesters worth of courses. Again, like with everything study abroad, there are always exceptions. So I would definitely recommend heading over to the Study Abroad website and checking out the Study Abroad guide, because it goes into a lot more detail and program specifics, like I mentioned, for our Smith programs abroad, as well as some of them that are outlined here. So I think that's everything as far as the language requirements go. And so again, as a quick recap, today we were really wanting to get into the weeds with you on program types and understanding the impact of the Study Abroad worksheet exercise that we went through last week, and for some of you today. We talked about program types. We talked about the availability of the type of experience you're looking for around the world, and language requirements and petition. Are there any sort of broad questions about what we've covered today? Or something you missed from last week? The QR codes here are actually from last week's session, but it's okay if you wanted to pull those resources up as well. There are no questions. Thank you so much. Next week, remember, if you wanted to come back, we're in the same spot, same time. And we're covering health, safety, budgeting, finances, all of that good stuff. Thank you.